मैंने महापलायन की इन वीडियो कथाओं में क्या देखा? नीला आसमान, ऊंची इमारतें, चमकदार चौड़ी सड़कें, हरे भरे पेड़, सब कितना खूबसूरत। मेरा भव्य भारत। मैंने इन वीडियो में क्या नहीं देखा? बेबस बदसूरत गरीब शहर से हांका हुआ गांव की तरफ भूखा भागता हुआ। शायद आधारहीन डाटा मुक्त है ये बेघर। तो कैसे दिखेगा मुझे ये? इन वीडियो में नहीं सुना मैंने कि सैकड़ों किलोमीटर चलेंगे ये लोग। एक मां और उसकी दिव्यांग बेटी, अनगिनत लोग। मुझे नहीं दिखा ये बिना सवारी हैं, क्योंकि अभी कोई रैली नहीं। ये गैर जरूरी है, गैर जरूरी, गैर जरूरी।
Very good morning, children. Today we're going to learn chapter 4, Tribals, Dikus, and the Vision of Golden Age. Well, the pictures that you saw earlier in the videos and the picture right now that you're seeing on the screen, you would have seen this in the news channels, and you would have been watching this for quite a while, that people walking on the roads. You would have heard that a small girl trying to walk from here to her hometown, and a bunch of people trying to walk thousands of kilometers from one place to another, from Delhi to Bihar, from Maharashtra to Bihar, from Bangalore to Maharashtra, and all those stuffs. Well, who are those people? Why are they walking? In the first place, why did they come from their village to different places, the urban areas, to work? Well, we call them the migrant laborers or the migrant workers. Well, the word migrant means you travel from one place to another for your livelihood, or for some other reason, betterment of your life. Well, these people basically, they moved from their villages to different cities and towns seeking jobs and livelihoods. Well, why did they move? Why did they migrate? What made them to migrate? Don't they have jobs in their villages? Or don't they have any livelihood, any source in their villages? That's one valid question, right? Have you ever tried to ask yourself about these people that you have been watching all these days in the TV channels and all the TV anchors talking about them and the politicians talking about this issue? Migrant workers. Well, the most of the people that you see on the roads today, I'm not telling that everyone, but most of the people that we see on the road trying to get back to the village, like Jharkhand and Bihar, the part of Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, or the eastern part of India, most of these people belong to the tribal community. The tribes. Well, one can ask a question. Being a tribe, why did they come out of their forest? Well, not only tribes, there are many people who came out of their villages, who were farmers. Earlier, the generations were doing farming, but they now have come out of their villages. Why have these farmers and the tribal people come out of their villages seeking jobs around the cities and towns? What forced them? What made them come out here? And we are going to understand that deeply in this chapter. Well, we are not going to focus on the agriculture part because we dealt it earlier in the previous lesson, about the blue rebellion and indigo and all those stuff. So now in this chapter, we're going to discuss about the tribals, what happened to them. Well, we will have to get back We're going to rewind a bit, and we're going to start with the British period. What did the British do to them? What happened to those tribes? Why did the British interfere in the lives of the tribal people? Now, I know you have a lot of questions popping up on your head. Well, we will deal it one by one. To begin with, we need to have a better understanding of the tribal life. How do they lead their life inside the forest? And what kind of lifestyle do they have? Well, the tribal life definitely have a way different lifestyle compared to our cities or towns, urban places. The tribal people, their livelihood is completely dependent upon the forest resources. When we tell forest resources, it means the trees, the plants, the herbs, the insects, the birds, the soil, the water resources around, whatever that they find in the forest, that helps them to live, to survive. These forest people, they're bound together with nature because they live in nature and they get their life from nature. So they're kind of connected. Their roots are twined or intertwined, I would say. So basically, their tradition and culture comes in from the roots of nature. Maybe the gods or goddesses they pray to. Maybe the culture, the celebrations, or the rituals they follow, they're going to be completely different from what we do here in our own lives. And when it comes to the social life, the hierarchy in the tribal system, they do not have sharp divisions like we have here, like the caste system, like the Varnas we talk about, the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and Sudras, the difference in the caste. But when it comes to the tribal life, they do not have this kind of sharp divisions and caste system. They live together. They hunt, they gather, they work, they share the benefits they reap. The same comes to the sharp economic division. We talk about the poor and rich. We have huge apartments and bungalows over here and small huts in the slums as well. But when it comes to the tribal community, there are no such sharp social divisions. People have small huts around. They build their own house. They live together over there. They do not have much big difference, except they have one clan leader, or he might be called as a chieftain or the tribal head as well, where he is one who has a lot of experience, rich knowledge that he gained from the previous generation, where he is on the seat to pass on his knowledge and experience and to lead the tribal people, the tribal community, facing all the dangers and odds, because he basically is the clan head to lead them. When it comes to lead, the tribal people, the tribal head does not have the term control, but to lead. There's a huge difference in that when we talk about the social divisions when it comes to what we have here. Well, that is a basic introduction about the tribals. When we talk about the tribes, there are no one particular tribe that we are talking about, because there are different types of tribal people. It depends upon the place where they live and the lifestyle that they follow for their livelihood. For example, there are Jhum cultivators, the tribal people who follow Jhum cultivation, and the tribal people who follow hunting and gathering, where they do not do agriculture. They just roam around the forest. Nomads, basically. They hunt and gather food. There's another group of tribe where they are nomadic tribes, where they move one place to another, herding their cattle, sheep, cow, and all those animals, looking for pastoral lands. And one more, where we call them the settled tribes, where they do settled farming. Unlike the Jhum cultivators, basically, they move from one place to another. Where the nomadic tribes, again, they move from one place to another. These settled cultivators, they build homes and stay in one particular place, and they cultivate the lands and reap crops. Right, let's begin with the zoom cultivators. With zoom cultivation, it means slash and burn cultivation. We also call that way, and it has different names in different countries and different locations. So basically, these tribal people belonging to the zoom cultivators, they cut the trees and top of the trees so that the sunlight can enter the dense forest. And they clear the land by burning the trees, and they use the same ash that the trees would burn, the ash, and they use the same ash as manure. And they cultivate the land, and once the harvest is done, they leave the land and they move on to a different place because they believe in sustainable farming, where one can question that slash and burn agriculture, you cut trees. But then these people, they do know their limits because they have a very good understanding of the place they live, the forest. They know that how many trees to cut and when to cut and when to do farming and when not to do farming, because those people are forest people. We cannot judge them, but just by the action, what they're doing. Well, when you come back to the zoom cultivation, they cut the trees, burn, and they use the ash, and they use that as manure, and they do farming and leave the place. They leave the piece of land because they leave this land for the land to regenerate its nutrients back, for the land to get its life back. Instead of cultivating on the same land again and again, at one point the land would cease, giving you the yield. The land would die, would lose all the nutrients. So they had that knowledge of soil. So those zoom cultivators, once they finish the farming, they move to a different land. So they keep moving from one place to another, which was a problem for the British. Well, we'll talk about that later. Now, when we talk about the hunters and gatherers, well, these hunters and gatherers, the name has it, they hunt animals and birds, they go around the forest and come back. As a group, they go out and come back and share their game. Game is like the hunt, the animal that they hunt. They share the food amongst each other, right, as a community. And gatherers, people go around, collect fruits and nuts. And some of the people in the community, they do weaving, and they collect some flowers and extract dye from it, the dye color. And these people, they get all this forest produced by gathering and hunting, and they sell it to the people who are out of the forest, maybe the villages outside, down the hills, or the traders who come in. They sell their forest produce and in turn get money from them or barter for some rice crops, which they're unable to grow in the mountains or hilly areas. So basically hunters and gatherers are of those type. When we talk about nomadic herders, these people, they just move from one place to another, herding their cattle, and some of them rear sheep, so goats, and you can find these kind of nomadic tribes in the Himachal Pradesh and Kashmir, Gujars, Bakhars, and all those tribal people. They basically depend upon the dairy products of the animals, where the sheep gives them the wool and milk, the skin, basically the leather. That's what they trade, and that's what their livelihood depends upon. And finally, the settled farmers, as we discussed earlier, the settled farmers, they settle in a place and they get a piece of land and stay there, build a house nearby, take care of the land, safeguard the land, and they harvest and sell the produce to the traders or the people outside and earn out of it. So these are the different types of tribal communities, and the livelihoods depend upon. Having had a better understanding about the tribal life and the different types of tribal communities around India, now it's time that we understand the role of the British in the lives of the tribal people in India. But before we get into it, we need to understand the difference between the Indian philosophy and the West. Well, we need to get into the story in order to have a better understanding of it. But let's begin the story. This story involves just two characters. One is Alexander the Great, as an emperor from Greece. You all would have heard about him. Alexander was named Alexander the Great The Great is attached to his military expeditions, where he had captured almost, majority part of the world that we have known so far. He was a great warrior, great strategist, a war strategist. Right? He was known for his valor. Well, he had captured Egypt, he captured Persian Empire, which was so huge those days. He had captured Iran, and then he came to India. And he somehow defeated the Indian kings as well, the Indian kingdoms, though it was a bit tough for him because they had never seen an elephant getting into the war field. Though they were scared, but still they were able to defeat the Indians. Alexander the Great defeated India, and he was so happy, but still he was not content enough. He wanted to conquer the whole world. He wanted the whole world beneath his foot. Well, when he conquered India, he was walking around the Indian mountains. He wanted to have a look at the mountains. At that time, he saw a sadhu. We call them sadhus, where they wear a small piece of cloth. They just wrap around them and they just sit and do tapas, meditation. Well, Alexander saw this old man sitting near the river, near the mountain, near the river, and watching the sun rise and just reading some manuscripts on his lap. Well, Alexander went close to the old saint and he asked him, "What are you doing here?" The saint looked at Alexander and he just smiled and he continued doing his work. But Alexander just wondering, he asked the old man, "Hello, old man. I'm Alexander the Great. I'm the great conqueror. Do you know me?" The saint said, "No, I do not know you." Well, Alexander laughed. "Okay, well, I have conquered your land right now. And while I conquer the whole world around, fighting wars and armies, and what are you doing here? Just sitting on the tip of the mountain. What are you doing?" The sadhu looked at Alexander and smiled. Alexander came close to him and sat near him because he was bewildered looking at the saint, the kind of silence, tranquility, the tejas on the face of the saint made Alexander to question more. So Alexander asked this sage, "What are you exactly doing here, mister? What are you achieving by sitting here simply? And you just have a piece of cloth wrapped around you." "Well, you have this life, a great opportunity to go around, do whatever you want, get what you want, achieve what you want." The sadhu laughed at him and asked him one question. "Alexander the Great, what do you get by doing all this, conquering, killing people, conquering the lands, become the great? What do you achieve by doing that?" Well, Alexander thinks about it for a moment and smiles and he says, "I become happy. I'm happy by doing all these things. It satisfies me." Well, the sadhu smiled and he said, "I do this. And I'm happy and content by just doing this, just by doing nothing." Alexander was astonished by listening to this because he has never heard such thing before. The sadhu just told him without doing anything, just by sitting with a piece of cloth, he is able to get happiness. Alexander was amazed. Well, children, what do we understand from the story? The difference in philosophy, the Western and the Indian. The Indian philosophy is more about self-contentment. You be happy with whatever you have with you. You have respect for the things that gives you life, and you just be happy instead of just going around and getting whatever you want. Because the Indian philosophy, Indian mythology, or the religion or culture, whatever, it says that life is a cycle. It just goes around and around. You get into different forms of lives. It's not just as one life for you to accumulate wealth. But the Western philosophy, where Alexander came from, it states that this life is all you got. That makes you to crave for wealth, crave for pride. Alexander had a belief that this is the only life that he has got, so he was trying his maximum to get whatever he wants. That is the Western philosophy. And in Indian philosophy is completely different. But this British who came into India came up with that mindset. So that is why the British always had this mindset of looking at Indian resources, maybe the forest, maybe the river, maybe the land, maybe the people, the animals, whatever they saw those as products which can be sold in the different market where they can get benefit from it. But while Indians, there's a huge question on Indians, where India had so many resources within us, and why didn't we use it? Why didn't the Indian kings or Indian emperors try to market their resources? Because our Indian philosophy is completely different. We do not do that. We are happy with what we have. We do not go around the world to conquer. We conquer ourselves within. Now, if you have this clear understanding, now you can understand the life of the tribal, because the tribal life is what the saints said. They live with what they have. They're happy with the trees and the wind and the rain and the frogs and the birds. And they're happy with the dance they do at nights and the songs they sing. But the British are not happy with France. They're not happy with whatever lands that they have conquered. They conquered so many continents around the world, but they weren't happy. They wanted to conquer India, and they came to India. They conquered our agricultural lands, and then they came to our tribal lands as well. This is a famous slogan from the Chipko movement. The Chipko movement was a movement organized to protect the trees from being cut. This is a conversation between a British forest officer and a tribal woman. Right here, this is how it goes. It's almost like a poem. What does the forest bear? What does the forest bear? Resin, timber, and foreign exchange. So said the forest officer. Well, the tribal woman standing against them told, with their own slogan, what does the forest bear? Soil, water, and pure air that are the basis of human life. Well, children, if you understand this poem or kind of slogan, you can understand the whole context of the lesson. Where the British had a different view of our resources, while the Indian tribal people had a different view on the resources that we had. Now let's get deep into what the British did to the tribal people. Well, let's now understand how the British colonial rule affect the life of tribal people in India. But one thing that we can always learn from the British is that they always come up with a strategy. They have a plan, and beneath that, they have strong strategies. And they approach it one by one until they achieve what they want to. And they were successful, I would say, most of the times. And when it comes to the tribes, they had a different strategy in their mind. And let's see one by one how they dealt with it. First, when you go for a war, when you fight against an army, the first thing that you will aim will be the captain or the head of the army or the king or the commander, I would say. Because once you defeat the commander, once you prove that you're stronger than the commander or the leader, and it's easy for you to get the rest of the army back at their heels running, because all their hope depends upon their head. And that's the first strategy. So they targeted on the chieftains, the head of the tribes. The first thing they did is that they ripped the power of authority, the administration power that the chieftains of the tribals had. They ripped them off. They took it off from them. And they made them just puppets. Just listen to what they say. They made the tribal chiefs to train, to convince the tribal community to listen to the British words. to follow their rules. They just gave them some namesake powers, and well, they can just collect the rents, or they can decide who's going to have the land and all those, which did not mean that they were actual head, a namesake tribal heads. That was the first strategy that they followed. Number 2 is forest laws. They came up with this concept of forest law. What is this forest law? I mean, if you want the tribal people to come out of the forest, the first you need, if you want to get the resources, if you want to lay hand on the resources of the forest, you need to get rid of the tribal people inside the forest, because they've been living there for a very long time, for generations. So you can't just go and put a request to them, or you can just convince them. Instead, they came up with a very strong forest law in order to conserve the trees, to protect the trees and the environment. Well, this forest law clearly states that the nomadic tribes, the shifting cultivators, or other tribal people roaming around, the hunters and gatherers, they have no rights to stay in the forest, enter the forest, roam around the forest. So they have to get out of the forest, which is really merciless, right? Because their livelihood depends completely upon the resources they have in the forest. But the British came up with this forest law. And the tribal people were asked to follow it strictly. Though we as Indians are not a big fan, or we're not fond of the British strategies that they applied on us to colonize us, but still we can learn a lot of stuff from them. Like the British came up with the strategy of this forest law, they found that they had a downside on it. What kind of downside was that? Like they realized that when the forest law is applied, the tribal people, naturally, they get out of the forest. If they go out of the forest, how will the British procure the resources from the forest? How will they get the resources? May it be like mining, because when they get into the forest, they plan for getting out the minerals, digging out the minerals by constructing mines. They plan for tea plantations, trees to be felled and tree plantations to be increased. And they had planned to cut the trees and sell the timbers. To do all these, they wanted laborers. But if these tribal people get out of the forest, then they will not have laborers. Naturally, it's going to be difficult for them to do business. Now, this, realizing the downside, British immediately, they came up with a strategy. First, they had a problem with this shifting cultivators, because these shifting cultivators, basically, they were roaming inside the forest from here and there, and it was very difficult for them to administrate them, or control them, or apply any law, imply any restrictions on them, because they don't stay in a place. So they forced the shifting cultivators, they requested, and they stopped. They did all they could to change them into settled community. Well, they came up with an offer for them. Well, they said that if you all get settled and we give you a piece of land and you can do agriculture over there, you can reap benefit. But in turn, we will have to provide us laborers. You have to come to our mines. You have to come to our tea plantations. You have to come to our logging area, cut the trees and help us. So this is one of the successful strategies. The British were able to win. That's what we can learn from them. They immediately found the downside and they worked upon it. So the tribal people who were roaming around the forest happily, depending upon the forest resources, content with what they had, the British came in, the story completely changed. They converted these happy tribes and they changed their livelihood. They changed them into laborers in the tea estates. They changed them to laborers in mining, because mining, it requires a huge physical labor. And when it comes to tea estate as well, the tribal people's life was completely changed by the British. So the tribal people who were happy and rich with resources that they got from the forest became poor. Is because since they had no livelihood, they came out of the forest, they started migrating. They started becoming laborers everywhere, traveling to the nearby villages and towns, seeking jobs like laying roads, building the construction work as laborers, carrying stones and loads and all odd jobs which they have never done in their life before. Because their generations earlier were either cultivators or hunters or gatherers or nomadic tribes, but now because of this they started migrating. Now do you get it? Where these migrants come from? But basically these migrants that we watched in the video earlier, and the picture earlier as well, that these people were once upon a time farmers in the villages, tribal people who were skilled in hunting, weaving baskets. They had rich knowledge about the herbs. They had rich knowledge about the forest, the insects, the birds. But now these people are on the roads because now their life depends upon the daily wage they get from us. Now, what do we lose because of this? What is the downside? Well, when we say that all these people turn into migrating laborers, what do we lose? We lose one of the most precious things that we ever had, the knowledge of the forest, the experience. It's a huge wealth that a country like India possessed for centuries. When these people come out of the forest, when they stop being tribes, when they lose their connection from their forest, we lose the knowledge, we lose the wisdom. And that was what happened right now. But those people know more about the herbs. Those people know more about the animals and forests. And even the recent news told that the tribes in Australia, I mean, they are no more right now because most of them are killed, like the British did it. The Australian tribes were also, sent out of the forest. Most of them were killed. And it's a research that tells that the Australian tribal people, they had the knowledge of stopping forest fire. The same with the Amazon tribes. The same with the Amazon tribes, yes. The research tells that the Amazon tribal people, the population has diminished because of deforestation and mining over there. But the people from Amazon are being chased out as well. Well, those people, the research says that, had knowledge of stopping forest fire because they have seen forest fire for ages, centuries and centuries. So they had knowledge how to stop it. But we do not have it. We tried our best through the helicopters. We tried sending the firefighters, but we lost a huge amount of forest that we had. Why is that so? Because we do not have the knowledge. We do not know more about the forest. We do not know more about the nature. Those natives, those tribal people, they're the sons and daughters of the forest, of nature. If we lose them, in turn, we lose a huge amount of wealth, the wisdom that this country has possessed for centuries. Sadly, this has happened for so many years, and we are at the brink of it. Let's try to protect the tribal people. Let's raise voice against them, and let's try to protect the environment that gives them life and livelihood. Thank you.